Hello all. In today's class, we are going to discuss the history of American drama up to the period of 1920s. The significance of the period 1920s lies in the fact that this period marks the beginning of modern American drama. Now, for the purpose of easy understanding, I have divided different stages of development of American drama under 5 headings. So, the growth of American drama can be broadly studied under 5 phases of historical development. First one, drama during the colonial period. Second one, drama in the pre-revolutionary period. Third one, drama after the revolution. Fourth one, American melodrama. And fifth one, modern realistic drama. You must understand the fact that the history of the evolution of American theatre is closely interlinked with the history of the American nation as a whole. The most important historical events that took place in America had its direct bearing on the evolution of American theatre as well. That is the logic of such a division. Drama during the colonial period. The earliest record of a play being enacted in America is to be found in the colonial year 1665. So, drama was introduced into America by the colonial British. The first play was A Bear and A Cub, and it was written by William Darcy, which was performed in a tavern by 2 actors. And what was the fate of this first performance? The 3 men involved in the event were arrested as the Puritans who migrated from England could not tolerate it. The Puritans considered theatre immoral, a waste of money and time, and irreligious. And as they settled in Plymouth and Massachusetts Bay colonies, they banned theatrical performances. However, in Maryland and the other southern colonies, liberal-minded Catholics and Anglicans provided a more conducive environment, especially after the ban on public theatricals was lifted with the restoration of the Stuarts in England in 1660. Now, theatrical activity during the colonial period. There is a good deal of evidence for theatrical activity in Williamsburg in the early 18th century. The plays produced in the 1730s included such London favorites as George Fucker's comedies, The Recruiting Officer and The Beaux Stratagem, Joseph Addison's neoclassical tragedy Cato, George Lillo's somber The London Merchant, and Susanna Senliver's most successful comedy, The Busy Body. Strolling players, that is, traveling theatre groups, presented Shakespeare and other English plays in early 18th century Philadelphia and New York. In 1749-50, the Murray Keene Troupe was the first theatrical company of importance to visit American cities. So, some famous English theatrical groups visited America and presented their plays in America. This particular troupe, that is Murray Keene Troupe's repertoire, differed little from provincial English theatres, except that conservative colonial audiences required frequent revivals of plays promoting morality and patriotism. Some of the wealthy classes were motivated more by economic development and community pride in introducing English plays in America than by their aesthetic concerns. In 1752, a failed London theatrical producer, William Hallam, decided to send to America his theatre company that was made up of his brother Louis. They had a relatively successful tour on the American mainland. David Douglas was another major theatre manager who had a successful career on the American mainland from 1758 to the Revolutionary period. Anglican elites, as opposed to Quaker elites in Philadelphia, asked David Douglas to build a theatre and bring his troupe to the city because they wanted entertainment they had known back in England. Like the new country itself, American theatre was built by rugged pioneers who crafted theatre in a virtual wilderness. In the colonial period, colonists strove to identify themselves with the mother country. The public spirited elite wanted British comedies and dramas with Enlightenment values and an emphasis on virtue. Colonialists, even religious ones who opposed the theatre, recognized the genius of a playwright like William Shakespeare. Colonial audiences loved comic opera, especially the ballad opera, an art form that owed its existence to the London success of Gay's The Beggar's Opera in 1728. David Garrick's farces brought a bright new edge to the genre and proved especially popular with colonial audiences. For 30 years, Garrick provided the template for English-speaking theatre, not only at home but also in the American colonies, and his influence lingered long after the war. By the 1770s, a new play might open in New York within 6 months of its London premiere. Colonial audiences tended to be more conservative than their counterparts in London. Overt opposition to theatre forced managers to offer Shakespeare under the George of moral lectures. David Douglas, for instance, advertised Othello as a moral dialogue on jealousy to get around anti-theatre laws, sometimes by providing benefit performances for charities. Managers convinced city fathers to give them a license to perform and gain sympathy of the public. Differences in dramatic taste between colonialists and revolutionaries became magnified during the Revolutionary War. The imposition of the Stamp Act in the 1760s led to attacks against everything British, including theatre, by the Sons of Liberty. For many colonial Americans, the theatre was a British institution and a symbol of the tyranny imposed by the English Parliament and King George III. For economic and patriotic reasons, theatre was banned during the Revolutionary War by an act of the Continental Congress in 1774, although there is evidence of amateur productions in Washington's army. The theatre in America, for all practical purposes, was a British institution during the Revolutionary War. Now, drama in the pre-revolutionary period. Gaining a hearing for the nascent American drama was much more difficult, and colonialists' first plays received no productions at all. Andrew Burroughs, the first play printed in America, was written around 1714 by Robert Hunter, the royal governor of New York and New Jersey. Witty and humorous, the play was set in an asylum with most of the characters having a counterpart in 1714 New York. Writers on both sides of the American Revolution wrote satirical, dramatic dialogues arguing for and against the wisdom of granting independence to the American colonies in the pre-revolutionary period. In 1787, Royal Taylor wrote the play called The Contrast. In form, it resembles Richard Sheridan's School for Scandal, an English comedy of manners that had been successful in London and that had played in New York at the same theatre during the British occupation. Set in New York, shortly after the Revolutionary War, The Contrast provides a lively view of contemporary society and subjects of interest to a local audience. The egalitarian nature of this new country is promoted front and center in the play The Contrast. The search for an American identity began when it became important to express cultural differences with the English and to define national identity. So, the revolutionary period was a boost for dramatists, for whom the political debates were fertile ground for both satire, as seen in the works of Mercy Otis Warren and Colonel Robert Munford, and for plays about heroism, as in the works of Hugh Henry Brackenridge. As the idea of America became a reality, questions arose both at home and abroad as to what defined an American. How did an American differ from his cousin in England? Tyler's The Contrast and his character of Jonathan helped define the tradition of the stage Yankee, the most successful type of American character to date and one imitated throughout the 19th century. Yankee characters were beloved by audiences as they depicted some basic attributes of the American character. They were rural, shrewd, honest, and hard dealing, but fair, seen by audiences both in America and in England as images of the democratic experiment. Jonathan, the country boy from New England, became, by the mid 1820s, the image of the common man in America. The contrast also contained beginnings of characteristics of melodrama. The success of The Contrast and Winnell's performance of Jonathan encouraged young New York artist and writer William Dunlap to write a play with a Yankee role for the actor. Up to the mid 1790s, Dunlap's plays had imitated what was in vogue in Europe. He gave evidence of something better with his blank verse tragedy, Andre, which premiered on March 30, 1798 at the New Theatre in Park Row, later the Park Theatre in New York. William Dunlap was a pioneer of American melodrama. Americans loved the dynamic and emotional nature of melodrama. Now, more about American melodrama. Melodrama was not the creation of American theatre. It was a creation of French theatre. French translation of the term melodrama was music drama. It referred to the practice of orchestra playing music in the background while presenting emotional moments. Early American playwrights translated French and German melodramas for the American audience. American playwrights used the plot formula of melodrama and began to fashion plays based on uniquely American themes. Now, William Dunlap translated French and German dramas and adapted it for the American audience. He translated the plays of Auguste von Kochebue and French melodramas. Melodrama conveyed a simple and straightforward viewpoint. In fact, most of the melodramas ended with a turning to audience and saying the moral of the story is the characters were always simple and stereotypical. One of the stereotypical characters that appeared in the American melodrama of the 19th century was a stage Yankee. He was a simple, straightforward character who was loved by the American audience for his rugged individualism. Blackfacing was a common character in American melodrama where a white actor would apply black makeup and present a black character on stage. Tim Rice, an early American playwright, created a character called the Jumping Jim Crow. Native Americans were also represented on American stage in a ridiculing manner. They were represented as drunken and shiftless and sometimes as noble savages. The election of Andrew Jackson to the presidency in 1828 marked a significant revolution in American politics. Jackson was an outsider, not part of the circle of well-bred men who had led the country from its beginning. He was a military hero, the victorious general at the Battle of New Orleans, with a reputation for being intemperate and excessively ambitious. With the center of gravity of the nations shifting away from the eastern seaboard, the future belonged to the entrepreneurs who were carving out the wilderness, building the canals and railroads, and establishing new towns and cities. The age of Jackson begins with the common man taking center stage in American social, political, and cultural life. Enlightenment values and classical precepts that had defined Western culture in the 18th century were shoved aside by this bumptious age. Jean-Jacques Rousseau in France, the Sturm and Drang movement in Germany, referred to a literary movement of the late 18th century that exalted nature, feeling, and human individualism and sought to overthrow the Enlightenment cult of rationalism. Goethe and Schiller began their careers as prominent members of the movement, and the American and French revolutions, Gothic literature in France and England, and August von Kochbu's dramas, melodramatic sensationalism, all played their part in destroying a rationalistic and collective vision of civilization and replacing it with a highly individualistic one that found truth in nature, not society, and in emotion, not reason. In fact, until the beginning of the modern, based on the rational and scientific principles of realism and naturalism, melodrama could claim history of 2 centuries on the American stage, as could be seen in popular plays like Gogol's The Poor of the New York, 1857, and Dali's Under the Gaslight, 1867. Melodramas posited a nation of 2 societies, one of aristocratic rich and the other of the poor of the North and the South in America, or a world of aristocratically conceived individualism and the bourgeois individualism. Changing what was essentially an English institution into an American one was a slow process, even with the contributions of Dunlap, Rosen, Barker, Noah, and the Yankee specialist. The standard repertoire at the Park, as well as Chestnut Street Theatre, the famous theatres in America, continued to follow that of Drury Lane and Covent Garden theatres in England. Shakespeare continued to be the most popular dramatist on both sides of the Atlantic, even as his plays faced attacks for their vulgarities, indelicacies, and immoral actions. Several plays, modified in the Restoration and 18th century, continued in service. Set in roles such as Hamlet, Macbeth, and Richard III, were crucibles by which actors measured their talents against their peers, and audiences flocked to theatres to compare performances. Right from its inception, American dramas displayed an actorly tradition. The actor acquired preeminence, not the playwright, on the American stage. The great Shakespearean actors from England like Edmund Kean, Junius Brutus Booth, and Charles Macready established theatre as a popular medium of entertainment in America. America's first international star, Edwin Forrest, sponsored 9 contests to acquire new plays with appropriate roles for himself. These prize-winning authors included John Augustus Stone, Richard Penn Smith, Robert Montgomery Burr, and Robert Conrad. All from Philadelphia, they, together with George Henry Boker and other locals, became known as the Philadelphia School. From about 1820 until the late 1850s, the Philadelphia School, together with writers from Boston and New York, developed a romantic drama in America. At the same time, Nathaniel Hawthorne and Herman Melville were creating a romantic literature. Forrest himself was a talented actor in the romantic tradition, but different. He worked out regularly in the gym and took pride in a muscular physique. His physical attributes made him more successful in roles that stressed physical force over the mental or spiritual. He seems an integral part of the Andrew Jackson Revolution of 1828 with a kind of raw energy and rabid nationalism. In 1848, the Albion would credit him with creating a school of acting that was strictly American and that embodied not only the national character but also its democratic idiosyncrasy, meaning an intense energy and physical display of force. However, American drama could not evolve as a discipline in dramatic art until the latter decades of the 19th century. In the late 19th century, the rise of theatrical and dramatic realism undermined the preeminence of actors. Steele MacCuish created a portable stage for his play Hazel Kirke 1880, and this drama was the first significant move towards stage realism. American theatre moved towards realism with its concerns for topical societal issues of the time. Now, the growth of American drama since the 16th century up to 1920 is the history of America as a nation, culture, art, and intellect. As a nation, America progressed from the settlement of European immigrants through the British colonial rule, the struggle for independence and its triumph, civil war, and the westward expansion. In art and literature, it embraced romanticism, melodrama, and realism. Thank you for your patient listening.